Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this AMPSEA Canberra feedback report back webinar. Just give people a few minutes to join, but as you join, why don't you say a quick hello in the chat. Welcome, I can see already Aaron Clark, Anita Blenkove, Dave Cundy, hello Dave, Matt Bissett, hi Matt, Paul Ryan, Roderick Van Gelder, Rowan Day. Just say hello in the chat if you'd like. I'll make it about 1 minute too, so we'll give people the opportunity to join. Maybe wait a couple of minutes till after the start time, and then we'll get underway with the intro of the speakers. Yeah, feel free to say a hello while we wait for a few others to join. And as always, as we go through, if you've got any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat, put them in the Q&A. Good morning, Roderick. Where are you joining from, Roderick? Kate O'Meara there, Laura Hope. Just have a quick hello as you're joining. Hello, Richard Welch, joining from Hobart, I would imagine. Just wait another couple of minutes to let some more people join, so that people don't miss out. 3,200 lightning, rainy in Melpera. I guess rain's a good thing, is it? Maybe not so much after the floods. Maybe looking for some more sunshine. Yeah, just wait another minute or so before we get underway. Say a hello. I see Michael Priest has joined there. So yeah, we'll give it another minute or so, and then we'll get underway. Introduce the speakers, a quick overview of what we're going to cover, and get underway. Thanks for joining. Those of you that have just joined, maybe say a quick hello in the chat, and we'll get underway very shortly. Okay, I make it 2 minutes past, so I'm going to stop the screen save. We'll get our speakers as large as life as we can on the screen. Let me just adjust here. Sorry. There you go. Well, a big good morning. Welcome. Nice to see so many familiar names in the chat. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Chris Robb, the CEO and founder of Mass Participation World. Great to have had the opportunity, and thanks for the invitation to host another one of these AMPSEA webinars, this time talking about the Trip to Canberra update. And today, delighted to be joined by Zali Steggall, OAM MP, federal member for the seat of Warringah. Hello, Zali. Thanks for joining us. Great to see you again. Chris Heverin, Chairman of AMPSEA and Managing Director of Spartan Race Australia. Hello, Chris. Good morning.
Yeah, hi, Chris. Great to be on, mate. Thanks very much for your support again.
No worries. Great to see you. And also joining us from the Northern Beaches, Lisa Dowsett, Director and Company Secretary of AMPSEA, but also Head of Events and Partnerships, Northern Beaches Council, and been fantastic to see your various posts with the various events that have been happening. Congratulations on getting those, Lisa. Good morning.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks for having me.
Wonderful to see you. Just a couple of quick Mass Participation World updates, just in case some of you may be interested. We have our fortnightly webinar tomorrow. I think one of the feedbacks we're getting, not tomorrow, Thursday, sorry. Yeah, tomorrow is Thursday. The commercial risk of people planning their events and then having them cancelled at the last minute. We've got some fantastic case studies. We have someone from ASO, the organisers of the Tour de France, talking about the Paris Half Marathon that was cancelled at 3 p.m. the day before. The Riga Marathon, which had 15,000 participants last year, cancelled 15 minutes before their road closures were due to go into place. We have someone from RCS. So RCS, if you don't know them, from Italy, they organize the Giro d'Italia, Milano Marathon, events in the Middle East and the like. They've had a whole portfolio of events that have been cancelled, some of them within hours and days. And then we also have the final one is an event out of Kuwait that was cancelled 6 days before, had a marvelous pivot where they staged an incredibly successful virtual event using a vending machine to distribute race packs and medals. So some really interesting case studies. That's fairly late for Australia, East Coast time, 10 p.m. It will be recorded and streamed live on Facebook. So if you'd like to watch it. A new initiative, an initiative that we just relaunched last week. Some of you would have seen as part of our conference in December. We did a study. I think it's wonderful, and it really speaks a little bit to what's been happening here. Government concerns about outdoor transmission. There's more and more studies that have started to come out. We have restarted our COVID outdoor event transmission data gathering, and that will now become a weekly feature of our Road Ahead newsletter. We've now got some great relationships with different websites around the world where we're starting to embed a clickable link in their websites. And the tally as of last Friday when we went out was 843,076 participants from the global data that we'd gathered, with only one outdoor transmission or one linked COVID case. And our hope is that we continue to build that story so it's a useful tool for you in the industry to use. Just a quick last one, our aid station, 100th edition going out this week. Very proud and excited about that. A wonderful interview with Hugh Brasher, the event director of London Marathon Events, and a great story. So if you're interested, to tune into that. So why don't we get underway? I'm sure there's questions that people are going to be popping in as you go ahead, and please, in the Q&A or in the chat, I'll look to curate that as we go on. We've got about 45 minutes allocated, so feel free to ask questions. But why don't we start by going to you, Chris, to please give us some insights into the trip to Canberra to meet with government. Why now? And obviously, you know, the burning question that I'm sure Zali will have some impact on, as well as how that relates to the end of JobKeeper and what that might mean for us. So over to you, Chris, to give a bit of an overview and the timing and what happened, please.
Yeah, thanks, Chris, and welcome everybody, and thanks to Zali for joining us this morning, and for the time that you've put in with AMPSEA over the last couple of months, and also Lisa, who joined me. We travelled together to Canberra back in March for a series of meetings. I think just in terms of recapping for a moment where AMPSEA has got to and what our activities have been this year. First of all, in 2020, obviously with the COVID situation, a new organisation getting together, getting collaborations through our industry for the first time ever. When we really look back, we've tended to operate in silos as an industry, whereas what AMPSEA's been able to do is get everybody working together, helping each other, assisting. The first priority of AMPSEA really last year was about COVID safe return, engaging with our members, the 450 plus businesses that have been supporting AMPSEA. It's been very much about providing direction and assistance in that area. As we've starting to come into the recovery phase, and we are getting some events back, it's been really apparent to the board that we needed to formalise AMPSEA. So we've actually formed the company limited by guarantee, a non-for-profit company. Our board has been moving towards doing a lot of work behind the scenes in terms of getting AMPSEA set up as a peak body in a professional manner, and that's taken up a lot of time. So we've probably dropped off a little bit in terms of this engagement with our members, but at the same time, we've been working very, very hard behind the scenes with the board to try and really focus on the key areas. In terms of the return this year and the timing, in talking to members, doing research, understanding what's going on, we felt that the JobKeeper scenario was going to be a big one for our industry. And so from a timing perspective, we started working in January to be able to set up a period in the middle of March to be able to go up to Parliament House and to meet as many of the key decision makers as possible in terms of still pushing this need to have our industry supported financially. And through Andrew Lee, who was one of the people that assisted us, Zali obviously has been a great help. And we'll talk a little bit more about Zali's role in a moment. And also through Darren Chester, which has been the Parliamentary Friends of Running group, we're able to facilitate a number of meetings, including meeting with Minister Tian's office and Minister Colbeck's office as well as a number of other MPs on that day. I'll let Lisa talk a little bit more in more detail about the people that we met and the follow-up from that. But I think the key thing that we identified coming into the new year was that AMPSEA had been bundled into, and mass participation events had really been bundled into the sport area. And what that means is that sport is very messy. When you look at community sport, you look at professional sport, you look at this battle that's going on at the moment between, the Prime Minister was talking about it yesterday, 100,000 people at the MCG, yet, you can't do in the same week that we had the 100,000 people or 70,000 people at the MCG, we had a small Spartan race for kids down in Latrobe Valley. We were only allowed 1,000 kids, which is crazy. So there's a contradiction. So we were in this pot of sport. And in lots of discussions internally with AMPSEA, we decided we needed to reposition ourselves. And so what we did is that we focused on two key areas. The first one is that the impact on the businesses. So fundamentally, businesses in the mass participation industry are SMEs. So we said, let's focus on the businesses. Just park events. What the events are, the outcome. It's actually the fact that we are businesses, that many businesses have had 12 months without income, that what's had to happen is that we were shut down instantly back in March last year. That still bills to pay, staff to pay. Certainly JobKeeper has helped. But what's happened is that, and the feedback we've had across the industry is that most operators have depleted their resources. So in order to keep the doors open, any resources that they've had, they've had to borrow, have had to go, put houses up and things like that in order to stay open. And so the expectation across the community is that we just flick the switch back on and that events reopen, and they just reopen. So, okay, yeah, they're back, and it just happens. Now, certainly for some of the bigger events with bigger companies and deeper pockets, that's fine. But we know that 65% of our event operators are not coming back in 2021. We know that from the data that we've collected through AMPSEA. So that's a big number of people that are being directly impacted. So they're under financial stress. They don't want to take the risk, which is fair enough. And so the issue is there. So that was the number one point about supporting our businesses. The second point that we really focused on is we felt we needed to take mass participation into the tourism sector. All mass participation events have a massive economic impact on communities. A large number of our events are staged in regional communities, regional areas, regional destinations. And that impact is in the millions and in fact billions of dollars that are being missed out on or not generated because the events are not coming back. And as a result of that, what we said is, let's focus our energies much more into tourism. Let's really drive that message. And interestingly, on the day, we were there the whole day. I think we met with over 20 parliamentarians and a number of other people, advisors and so on. And interestingly, everybody has their own take on this. But one of the things I was really pleased about is that we actually stuck to our key messaging. And we said, this is the two things. We have businesses that are in trouble, and we have tourism that is not getting this income and the economic benefit. And they're the two areas we need to focus on. And as a result of those meetings, what we then did is we revised our stimulus package, and we've gone back to the minister. And again, without preempting too much what Lisa and Zali will talk about, we have put together a revised package asking for direct stimulus to our businesses and to get our businesses back trading, and to be able to give them the working capital that's needed to be able to get events back off the ground without, losing houses and so on. And make no mistake, we're a long way off in Australia in the events world from being back and really functioning. It's great to see that there are events coming back. We had our first main Spartan race last weekend, which was a great success, but there are big financial implications around running a COVID-safe event. And resourcing wise, it's tough. It was great to see our athletes and our participants all having a great time and love being back. But we can see that it's still a long road to go. And when you look at what's happened in WA recently, you look at what happened in Queensland at Easter. There's no guarantees for us. We've still got a long road to hoe. So, the call out to the government is very much, this is an industry that's still under stress and under duress. We need your help. And that was really the crux of what we did in Canberra back in March.
Fantastic. Thanks, Chris. Maybe we come across to you, Lisa, now to give a few more details of that before we come to Zali and get some insights in terms of, the mechanics of how it moves forward now and time zones and that kind of thing, timelines and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think just adding on from where Chris left off is really when we went to Canberra this time, we had very much spent the last year trying to navigate where in government was the best to target. And we knew we had to start in federal. We obviously have events across the nation that are heavily impacted and continue to be. And as Chris said, the stress of we might be able to plan our event now, but we're the first to go if anything happens, and we can go the night before. You mentioned a lot of events around the world. We know, in New Zealand, we had Round the Bays get cancelled the night before, 35,000 people. So it is still impacting us. We spoke with senior advisors as at both the Minister for Sport and also the Minister for Tourism. And so in those discussions, they obviously both talk to each other as well. We pitched that need for a stimulus package now, and that's, the realms of $48 million based on the data collected from our audience. And so we need that support now to help the businesses that are part of our membership and those that may not have heard of AMPSEA and signed up yet. But with the end of JobKeeper at March, it was really important to go in at that time and really push. We pushed for extension of JobKeeper to support the industry, but we knew that large stimulus package is needed right now to support the events that can't come back this year. We've got, everyone knows we have a large number of events. We've got Sydney Running Festival, you've got Noosa Try, you've got Run for a Reason in Melbourne, not Melbourne. In Perth, it's cancelled already for this year. So big numbers of events with big numbers that are driving tourism dollars are cancelled already for this year. And so that was the real target, is to drive that tourism message. We know, Noosa Try drives $30 million. We've got Sydney Running Festival driving $80 million. Ironman in Port Macquarie, Cape to Cape in WA. We've got these events that drive economic impact to those businesses that are local to those areas, and that's what supports more broadly government in terms of helping businesses across the board and not just our own. This package allows events to go ahead, which then puts money into those local economies, which supports the industry as a whole. So that's really important. And then, after Zali talks, I think we can definitely get into, yes, there's this $48 million that we're asking for, but beyond that, we need to talk what's next. And that's every level of government. And that talks health orders, how across the board, we are still stuck, as Chris mentioned, at low numbers compared to things like football stadiums, things like Mardi Gras, that are continually going ahead when our events are capped at smaller numbers. And we need to push that as our secondary message to state level governments to be able to support this industry's return.
Thanks, Lisa. So interestingly, you speak about a number of 48 million. Chris alluded to the fact that 65% of the industry won't return in 2021. We're now sitting here beginning of May. So you're saying that, those 65% are gone, or is this an opportunity to kind of resuscitate some of those 65% of businesses, or are we now really looking at trying to save the 35% of the industry that is still here? How does that relate to the bigger picture of, obviously this need for our industry once we come out of COVID? And I know the focus is on tourism, and that's really important. There's obviously the health benefits that come without muddying the waters, but we're an industry that's going to be needed by governments, and I'm seeing this repeated all over the world. But is that 35 million to just make sure that we have the 35% that can survive, or is there still an opportunity that we might be able to breathe life into some of the 65% and maybe bring that back to 50%?
I think there's absolutely opportunity to bring it back. I think we've seen, and we'll do some numbers and some research into stats since JobKeeper has finished, but we'll see people leave the industry, and that's a real disappointment, and it's going to be hard to replace. But what we want to try and do is prevent those 65% of people being, or events and SMEs being gone for good. There is a level that we can bring them back. Obviously, smaller events at the moment can go ahead, and those medium to bigger events can't. So that stimulus packages are really around supporting those through the next 12 months as well, to make sure that they can return when we're able to.
If I could add to that as well, that there is precedent for this, which we have sent through to the Minister's office, and that is in New Zealand. So the model in New Zealand was there was grants made to the events industry, regardless of the size of your event. So from the big guys like Ironman through to the local mum and dad operators, they were all eligible to apply for the grants and receive grants. And part of the deal was, though, that they needed to spend that money on their event and have it documented, or on events, within 90 days of receiving it, with suppliers that are connected to the events. So that was the caveat that was placed over the grants, which we're saying that's exactly what we want to see here. So, Chris, it's a really good question, and I know it has come up previously last year, and we're certainly, AMPSEA is here for everybody. It's 100%. We want to get 100% of people back. We want to grow the industry. There's absolutely no doubt there is a demand out there. People, a large number of people. We know the stats from World Athletics. Particularly that running has grown by 80% globally. We know that there is an increased market out there. We've got to be able to capture that market through having businesses that are financially viable, and that's the big message that we want to put through.
Yeah, it's a great point, Chris. And obviously the other thing is that loss of years, decades in many instances of knowledge into the industry, as well as even when, if we're able to restart this, those people have moved on to other things, and it's an event where experience is so important, as an industry where experience is so important. Thanks for that. Zali, let's come to you. Obviously you're passionate about this industry. You're a participant yourself, in a number of events. You see the benefit from a participant, but obviously also this tourism impact. How does this now work, I guess, from a practical perspective? It's great to have got this traction. What can the industry now expect as in terms of the processes of working this through government, potentially timelines and what else maybe needs to be done that you're obviously helping AMPSEA with?
Yeah, thank you, and welcome everyone. Thank you for having me. I am a participant, I should say. I've got my Ultra T-shirt from the AA Ascent, which I was very happy to see go ahead, and I have the UTA 100 coming up in 2 weeks. So it might actually be an opportunity, assuming I don't fail miserably, to do a bit of a media call out for a mass participation event, because I do know firsthand what events, mass participation events bring to regions firsthand. I know I go up and have training weekends. It means numerous times of staying in the mountains and training and supporting the local economy. And I know that's what happens for all participants. So I do appreciate the importance that your industry brings from an economic sense. And in my discussions with Chris and Lisa, it was very much that I definitely support the repositioning of mass participation events around tourism and events, and not sport, because the problem, as soon as you're identifying as sport, is you're not identifying as it's not sport in the sense of the big football stadiums. So the way the government and you raised it a little bit before, the cricket tests and the football games seem to be able to go ahead with big participation numbers, but smaller events are getting hampered by limits to participation. I would put that down to lobbying power of those football codes and the sway of the boards of those venues. So if you think about, the SCG and the stadiums, they have very connected in the business world, those boards, and so they are driving with the government, and when there's been outbreaks, they're driving the negotiations of what the participation or what the audience allowance is going to be around those events, and to maintain the economic viability of those opportunities. So I think it's really important for the mass participation events to similarly have that unified voice to government, whether it's federal government or state government, but also to be talking about what your contribution is to the economy and to especially regional economies. It's really important. From my meetings with you, I went and had the meeting with Minister Tehan and explained to him very much that repositioning, why it was important that he view AMPSEA and mass participation events as tourism events and not sporting events. Even though I appreciate you've got big and small players within the organisation, it's too easy for it to be dismissed as the small local community fun run that is a nice to have but not a necessity for the local economy. And I'd say that with complete respect. I participate in them. But when government is making decisions around lockdowns, around permits, around what's going to go ahead, where community transmission risk is, I do believe a part of the equation in their decision making is what is, vital to the local economy, to services continuing, and what is a nice to have but dispensable. And I think, unfortunately, that's where we see them making very arbitrary and, I would say, unfair decisions on certain events get to go ahead with full participation and other events get cancelled at a minute's notice with huge economic impact. We've seen that across the arts and entertainment industry as well. You just have to look at the Blues Fest up at Byron that just got cancelled without very little consideration compared to Boxing Day cricket tests that goes ahead. So there is a double standard, and I think you have to just be smart in where the events are positioned to get that better consideration. So following my meeting with Dan Tehan, he did raise, he wanted to understand your membership, and I understand that was we passed that on. What are the numbers? So again, it's really important to explain to the minister and to the government the scale of what we're talking about. I appreciate it because I participate in them. I think Andrew Lee would appreciate them, Darren Chester would appreciate it. But look, as a general rule, I don't think it needs to be spelled out for government to really understand the impact and the opportunity. So that got forwarded on, but I'll be really keen to see the ultimate sort of ask that was made to the minister to follow up on it in terms of what is he doing about it. I think an important, example to go on or in the ask to the government is like the RISE grants. So RISE are the grants that the government approved in respect to arts and entertainment, and they were very much events-based grants. There has been some difficulty in the rollout and not all the money has gone out, but I do think that's the model, and it's quite similar to what you're talking about, what was rolled out in New Zealand, which is event-specific grants so that happens. The other model would be a specific package model to the industry, like what essentially the travel agents have, which is I don't think the government is not going to be open to continuing JobKeeper in the form, they've let that go. There's been time. I just don't think they will reintroduce a mass support program in that sense. But there are specific industries that are getting niche support. So travel agents, for example, are the industry that has a special recovery package, and they have tranches of package, and so there's a first package, and when that is exhausted there's a second and there's a third. There is a commitment from government that they will support that industry up to 6 months beyond full vaccination and opening of borders. So because that industry is recognised as, until borders are open, it will take another 6 months for essential people in that industry to be on their feet and able to get back to proper trading. And they are very similar to the mass participation events in the sense that you're both industries that have had to give a lot of credit notes, essentially, because any enrolments to events from 2020 that were cancelled due to COVID, I know from my experience, I've received a credit note in the event for 2021, which means you're doing the work twice. You've done the work to set it up the first time, you've cancelled it, you've had to set it up for 2021, hopefully, and you're not receiving new enrolment fees. A lot of it has rolled over. So I totally understand that difficulty then for operators to actually run the events without revenue. So I think they're the two models to look at in how to structure the assistance from the government, and I think it has to be weighed up both ways, what might suit best. The travel agents model one requires application, requires each individual entity with an event to justify their loss and have a claim approved, and then there's an appeal system. So it's kind of it's procedural and it has its problems, and I'm obviously talking to that industry on their behalf to government about trying to streamline it. There has been difficulties with both types of assistance, so I can't say that one is easier than the other, but I definitely think it's the way you need to go. Really important to have data around what's lost. So what percentage of events are unable to be held this year due to financial circumstances of the lockdown last year. Also, you need to show the economic impact of the snap health lockdowns. There's no doubt about that those decisions, especially at incredibly short notice, have a huge impact on consumer confidence in being able to sign up for events, especially interstate events. I would say even me, I'm comfortable signing up for an event in New South Wales, less certain to go interstate because there's no guarantee. So they're all the elements that I think you really have to focus on in the advocacy to government, and I'm absolutely on board to help any way I can.
Thanks, Zali. Some great insights there. A couple of things I picked up on there is obviously the power of lobbying. And Lisa earlier had said it's kind of taken a year to get a sense of where we sit and where we go, which for me just really highlights this enormous value of AMPSEA, and the fact that these other sports are already so well positioned and able to lobby, not only from the perspective of that they're powerful and big and more global, but I guess the point I'm making is it's so important for us, I think, as an industry to be lobbying each other to make sure that we support the work that's being done by the executive here, that people are signing up and so on, because the reality is that, there may be another COVID, there may be a something else, and we're going to be so much better positioned. And I'm seeing this all over the world where these alliances are coming together. And AMPSEA for me is a shining example of one that's come in with a long-term strategy. Some others have just come in to say, we just want to get government funding, we just want to get approval, and then we'll dissolve and move on or whatever. But this long-term strategy is so crucial. So I think I can't stress enough from what I'm seeing around the world. Support these guys that are doing this all for you, and the whole people, when I say guys, not meant in a male sense, the team that's pulling this together is so valuable, and they need the support of the industry. Zali, you mentioned the two opportunities. So where does that sit, the RISE grants and the niche grants? Does AMPSEA go and say, we would prefer to get a RISE grant, or is government going to come back and say, we're going to give you the niche grant opportunity? How does that work? Maybe just to help people on the call understand is how those next steps might be to get some traction and a decision.
Well, unfortunately, at the moment, so the RISE grants was something announced by the government in relation to the arts and entertainment sector for the big music venues and those events being cancelled. Now, I don't understand that mass sports participation events are eligible for that funding. So, but what needs to be argued is you are just as needing such support as, a blues festival in Byron Bay brings in probably a very similar amount to the regional economy to a mass event in a regional town. Like, I know Ultra Trail being cancelled last year in May is a whole week's worth of people staying up in the Blue Mountains. It is a huge impact. So I think there needs to be that lobbying of government to make sure that if you're going to do it for one industry, other industries that are in the same boat with the same characteristics, who bring the same benefit to local economies, should be getting that same assistance. There's no reason why one and not the other. Keeping in mind, arts and entertainment have had to fight pretty hard compared to other areas that also, I think the government has been a little bit blinkered in how it's viewed what assistance is needed. But its main response until JobKeeper finished was, look, we've got this blanket JobKeeper. It's out there to help everyone. So we can't really look at specific industries on top of what we're doing. Now that we've finished JobKeeper and that's off the books, the question is really establishing those particular cases for industry that require specific industry-specific packages. And it really has to be linked towards economic productivity, because the government, they're announcing a lot of spending for the budget for next week, but at the end of the day, it was very difficult for them. The JobKeeper model is not something they will go back to willingly. Now, in relation to like snap lockdown outcomes, I advocated with the government. For example, Warringah, we had a snap lockdown at Christmas for 3 weeks, which had a huge economic impact on the area because that's our key trading period. I advocated to the government that we should be a health order lockdown is not currently included in the definition of eligible disaster for disaster relief. So when a community is impacted by flood or drought or bushfires, the state government can make an application to federal for a declaration of emergency relief, and that flows certain impacts. At the moment, a pandemic, a health declaration around a pandemic is not included in that definition. So that's something I advocated for, that they should be looking at that, so that when you have a snap lockdown, for that period of that snap lockdown, you have emergency relief, just as a community hit by a disaster gets emergency relief. They've resisted that. And again, they've resisted that on the basis of, we've got JobKeeper in place, we're already helping everyone, we can't help any more than what we're already doing. But obviously, that's no longer in place. So I think the discussion around all these different ways of introducing assistance to cover these scenarios has to be continued, and I think needs to be repeated. So I saw in one of your comments a participant raising, underwriting of insurance in the event of a snap lockdown, health lockdown, getting government to do that. I think they're definitely ideas and suggestions to be fleshed out and put to government.
I think, Zali, just on that one, Chris, if I jump in for a moment,
Chris.
Two things that came out of the day in Canberra very much. One was around, we felt that it was important not to reinvent the wheel. So the example I used earlier about New Zealand that has worked really well, we certainly pushed that, and we have sent documentation through to the Minister's office around that model, because we felt that was, again, let's not create something new. This is something that's worked across the ditch and it's worked well. The second thing is that we had quite a lengthy discussion with a few of the politicians in the lunchtime meeting that we all got together around that idea of government actually underwriting that sort of critical force majeure type insurance, where the situation, like a number of our events have been cancelled at really short notice. Like I know in WA, there's been a couple over there that with the recent lockdowns, that events have had to be cancelled, and so we'd certainly be really in favour of that concept of the federal government. And I think the role of AMPSEA is very much about federal, because we're representing the whole country, to be able to then have that insurance backing from the government to say, well, you're an event operator, you've spent $500,000 to this date and committed $500,000 to get this event up, and all of a sudden the event's collapsed, and you've got this issue of credits and refunds and so on. To have a policy of that nature would be really, really well received. So I think there's two elements there. One is that going back to the support for business. The second one is then, how do we drive the industry going forward where we're still having these snap lockdowns?
If I can jump in as well on top of that, in terms of when we talk about coming out of a COVID snap lockdown, and I am fortunate enough, I'm in Zali's area, so running events in this area, we are proactive, and having that conversation, our number one priority right now is federal government and that financial support for our industry, but secondary lies the health orders. And you know, our events bring back people to the community. They bring back people when you talk about tourism or local visitors or people coming for day trips. They come back because events are being held, and we know this. We held the Sun Run 3 weeks after lockdown from the Northern Beaches. We've had the WSL surfing event here that had 5,000 people to it because that was the order at the time. But we need to have that secondary conversation with state level governments around the health orders and the impact that that's having on our events being able to come back and drive that tourism back to local businesses as well as the event itself.
Great point, Lisa. And I think, Chris, I introduced you to Stefan Movin, who's the president of the Swedish Alliance, and they've been successful, excuse me, in getting the government, the Swedish government, to do an underwriting program to support events, and they've partnered with a broader range of people. So that maybe some opportunities to learn from what they've been able to achieve there. We've got about 5 minutes left. I think, Roderick, that's answered your question there that Zali touched on. You know, from a timeline, Zali, you spoke about, you know, budget being drafted at the moment. I mean, is it too soon to expect that this would be addressed in some way in the budget? From those that are listening, what's a realistic timeline in terms of managing expectations as far as your crystal ball goes? Obviously, there's a lot of moving parts to this, but a sense.
Look, I'm heading down to Canberra on Monday. Budget is on Tuesday. Look, the way the government works and the Treasurer works, they'll sprinkle their fairy dust out the week before to try and, you know, reveal what's the good news story. Obviously, at the moment, the news cycle is pretty dominated by other issues. So, whatever the sprinkling of announcements from the budget has been kind of, you know, distracted. I haven't seen anything around this, but there's going to have to still be economic stimulus. It's a little hard to tell because the numbers are better than expected still in terms of unemployment and, I guess, bounce back from the economy. So that unfortunately, well, it's good in one sense, but it is bad in the other, in that it reinforces the sense within for the Treasurer and the government that they've done enough to help the economy go, and now it's got to kind of, you know, training wheels are off and everyone's got to get back on the horse. So it's I don't know if we're going to see packages or a specific announcement. I don't think there would be a specific announcement on Tuesday, but what there will be is there is scope within the budget for support of various industries. And for example, the RISE, and I say the RISE grants because they're an example that matches the model like what was New Zealand in terms of event-based support. There is funding there, and I would expect there to be some more funding again in the tourism portfolio in the budget. So the key then is to be lobbying hard for a share of that allocation in the budget. So we've got it noted in our notes. So obviously I head down to the budget with a bit of a, you know, my wish list of what I'm hoping to see announced, what areas I'm looking for, and I will highlight, you know, pretty quickly if I think there's something there or not, or if there's potential for something. So even if it's not identified as mass participation event funding, if there is something there that I think you can really lobby for a share of that funding, we will definitely, you know, make sure that you're onto that as quickly as possible.
Thanks, Zali. So lobbying obviously a key point. Sorry, Chris. And one thing, you know, with a few minutes to go, I'd like to ask is, from your perspective, you know, Chris and the rest of the executive, is there anything that the members can do to help this process? Is there data that's not being provided that would be valuable? Are there people that can help you with connections? I mean, any appeal for help and support from the great work that the executive's doing from the members?
I definitely think for all members, make sure you are known to your local MP. So you need to be making sure your local MP knows what you bring economically to your area. So they are focused on the economic impact, jobs, you know, the amount of people that get employed. I know it tends to be probably casual or contract employment for the period of time and the lead up, but then getting that data from your, surrounding businesses, from catering to accommodation to everything else around the events, to really understand. I know AMPSEA has got the data of what it estimates brings to local regions from events being held, but I think for an individual MP to be aware of the impact is really important, because you can't underestimate a coalition MP going to the party room and saying, right, I need you, this event is at risk of being cancelled in my electorate. This is going to have this much impact. I need to make sure that doesn't happen. And just the more awareness. So you're up against if I say the established sporting codes, which have, they have major stadiums. There is a lot of money invested. There is huge, the boards are all mainly business people that have connections within the parties, within government. So it really is about broadening awareness of your events, not just as this is a great mums and dads community event, we all go out and have a fun run, but hey, our event brings this many people, this is the impact locally.
Zali, that's a great advice. And sorry, Lisa, can I just quickly there, because I think it's an important one, and I'm not trying to hog the conversation. So make that aware to your local MP. Can you give some practical insights? Because I'm guessing, for some that's easier said than done. We're an event organizer, we're not connected. Any tips as to how they should get in front of their local MP and make sure that they are heard?
Ask for a face-to-face meeting. Emails get flicked off. Not flicked off, but, there is a workload, and you need to make sure, whether you've got an independent coalition or especially if you're in a regional area and you have, for example, a national MP, nationals tend to come into the parliament very much focused on what's in it for regional communities. So really emphasise that and your plight. I think it's really important. So not hard to look up your local MP, find out their email address and their phone number, but make sure what you're asking for is a face-to-face meeting. MPs love turning up at your events, blowing the start gun, getting the photo, getting the public, getting the trying to be seen by their communities. So that's what they get out of it. They want to be seen to be supportive and get the promotion locally because they like to get elected. But what you have to ask for is something back. So don't just invite them out to the event so they get the free publicity for themselves. Make sure that what you're getting out of it is a proper meeting where you really put your business case and your plight and really ask for action and follow up on that action. So if they say they're going to raise it in the party room or take it back to the minister, ask for that in writing, ask for some follow-up, hold them to account. Lisa will know, locally in Warringah, there's a lot going on, but that's our job. MPs' jobs is to represent their communities. They're not there for anything else.
And I think I can jump in now, Chris. I think that's an example when we were in Canberra and we had the Parliamentary Friends of Running group. If I've got the right person, Susan Templeton, who's Macquarie, which is where Blue Mountains sit, she came straight up to me and said, what can you tell me about the UTA event and what it delivers to the region? Because I know if that event goes that we're hit. So we've put her in direct contact with head of Ironman, who's given all the stats, the economic impact for her to lobby more broadly, but specifically for her area at the same time. So where there are people that have events that drive that impact, and we're happy to support with data, but if you're on the ground, and as Zali said, ask for a face-to-face meeting. Go, if you can't get directly to the MP, go through your local mayor, because they generally will answer you as well, because they're the other person starting the firing guns. So we're banging the doors down, and we do need the help and support more broadly to get that broken down when we go to the federal government again.
Thanks, Lisa. We're
Chris,
pretty much
just on the back of that,
to wrap it up, Chris. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just going to say to support, we're certainly not going away. So, it has been a battle, and but we're certainly not going away. And I think for the AMPSEA members and people on this webinar, that's the message. Spread the word. Keep supporting what we're doing. We are, really, we're not going away. We're going to be back in front of the minister as quickly as we can. The reality is we've got 65% of our industry are at the moment not sure whether they've got businesses or not. And that's a huge number, and we've got to make sure we do something about it. In terms of AMPSEA going forward, there are some other initiatives that we're working on, which we'll be talking about in future webinars and so on. We are creating an AMPSEA conference for later in the year for the industry, which will be in November. We're going to be doing that in partnership with the Australian Sports Conference, which will again is rebranding at the moment, but that will be at the end of the year in November in Melbourne. And we'll also be connecting with in the middle of the year for a workshop session with another event around July, which we're about to finalise in the next week or so. We'll be announcing that as well. So we're basically inviting members and board members will be attending an event most likely in Sydney, and we'll be rolling our sleeves up, getting involved in that event, helping that operator, and workshopping with AMPSEA in terms of how we can develop the industry further and increase. We're also looking quietly behind the scenes at a national insurance scheme in terms of mass participation as well. A little bit of work to be done in that space, but there is a big opportunity there to insurance is obviously another big issue that we're all going to deal with. So there is a lot happening behind the scenes. I'd encourage people to spread the word, support what we're doing, and hopefully we will get there. We're not going away, that's for sure.
Fantastic. Keep up the great work. A big thank you, Zali Steggall, Lisa Dowsett, Chris Heverin, and for all of those of you that joined in. Look forward to seeing you on the next one, and keep on the fight where we will get there in the end.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Zali. Thanks, Lisa.
All right.